Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Beneath the Surface with Marine Mammal Care Center. It's a lecture series that has been made available to us by Marathon Petroleum. They're the ones that help us to put this on for all of you, and we thank them so much for their generous support. I want to thank and introduce our speaker for tonight, Dr. Fernando Trujillo. He is going to be talking to us a little bit about river dolphins and their conservation in the Amazon and Orinoco River basins. I've had the pleasure of getting a chance to hang out a little bit with Dr. Trujillo at a recent conference in Heilsbronn, Germany, just outside of Nuremberg, where we discussed the merits of using social sciences and human dimensions in conservation. If you were part of the lecture, our last lecture where I gave a talk, you learned a little bit about that. Dr. Trujillo is one of those amazing people who participated and enriched that event so much. Dr. Trujillo has innumerable awards. He's been recognized by so much for the amazing work that he's done. He has a master's in environmental science from the University of Greenwich in London, a doctorate in zoology from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. And I think he pretty much serves on almost every international panel that there is from his title. He's a National Geographic Explorer with over 200 publications. Really excited to introduce you all to Dr. Fernando Trujillo. Take it away, Fernando.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon for everybody. It's already night here. And I will try to take you to the Amazon and to the Orinoco during the next 45 or 50 minutes. I will share my screen and yes. Could you see?
Yes.
Well, probably people don't know a lot about river dolphins, but they are very fascinating animals. Today, I will try to introduce you about the river dolphins, what threats they are facing, how we start all this project, when we start and why, and some reflections about from the local to the regional and again to the local, looking in conservation. I will tell you a little bit about what kind of scientific research we are doing. And the most important thing is how to build solutions with local communities. Of course, we need to talk about the political level and also the future of these animals and these species. People are not very aware about the presence of river dolphins in the planet. There are few species in reality. There are some in Asia. They are very endangered. We have in the Ganges and the river Indus and the Bangladesh, some species. We have river dolphins in China, the Lipotes vexillifer, the baiji, but it's already extinct. We have other species of marine dolphins going inside the rivers as a facultative river dolphins. And in South America, probably we have the highest diversity of species. When I started to work with river dolphins 35 years ago, there were only two species, Inegioprensis and Sotalia fluviatilis. But during the last year, we have discovered molecular and genetic difference, and we probably are going to have 5 or 6 different species. But why river dolphins? Why they are so important or relevant? And one of the reasons is this: very emblematic for water and the forest. River dolphins are like the jaguars in the water. They are the top predators in the Amazon. They are able to move inside the flooded forest, in black rivers, clear water, big rivers, confluence. They are everywhere. So they are the top predators in the Amazon. But as well, they are very interesting because they are part of the mythology of the indigenous people in the Amazon. The indigenous talk or believe that the dolphins have underwater cities and they live like us. And there are some interactions between dolphins, this world of the dolphins and the humans. So there is a very strong and powerful legends around the dolphins. We have the Amazon River dolphins, and so far we know that we have Inia geoffrensis, Inia boliviensis, and during the last year, some genetics discovered a new species in the Araguaia Tocantins river basin in Brazil, the Inia araguaiensis. And also we have the gray dolphin, the tucuxi, the Sotalia fluviatilis. The pink dolphins are the largest river dolphins in the planet. They can reach almost 2.8 meters and 200 kilograms. And the tucuxi or the Sotalia fluviatilis are smaller. It's like a very similar marine dolphin, but it's only 1 meter 50, 1 meter 60 at most. The starting point of this project was in the Colombian Amazon 35 years ago. Basically, I started the project in a very small town, indigenous town, in the south of Colombia on the river Amazon. It's a small town called Puerto Nariño. There are some indigenous communities there. Most of them are indigenous. There are Ticunas, Cocamas, and Yaguas. So when I arrived to the Amazon, I was 19 years old. I was in the middle of my career as a marine biologist. And when I arrived to the Amazon, I believe I was expert on everything. And I suddenly, and very far, discovered that I didn't know anything. So I needed to start to learn from the indigenous how to move in the forest, how to see the animals, how to detect the presence of the dolphins. So it was a very important step in my life. So a lot of years have passed during all this time, and we have learned a lot of things from dolphins. We needed to design our methodologies to study river dolphins, especially to count river dolphins. It's not very easy. So we needed to develop a very strong methodology to count the river dolphins. We identified the threats. I remember when I started to work in the Amazon, I used to find like 20 dolphins dead, entangled in the Amazon. But with the time, I realized the dolphins started to know how to avoid the nets, and even with the time, they learn how to catch the fish from the nets. It was very important to learn about the local perception of people around the dolphins, because in that way we could promote the dolphins as a flagship species. We were developing as well the good dolphin watching practices as an economic alternative for local people. And we are doing a lot of acoustic and genetic and also health assessment evaluations with river dolphin during the last years. But we are talking here about a very large area. We are talking about 3 different river basins, the Amazon, the Orinoco, and the Tocantins. And that means 9 millions of square kilometers, 9 millions. It's a huge area. The Amazon is the largest tropical forest in the planet. And we have several species in 7 countries. So what is the Amazon? This is 7 millions of square kilometers. The Amazon itself is one of the largest rivers in the planet, and they produce 17% of 17 to 20% of the fresh water in the planet. And they are very important as a regulator of the climate in the planet. But not many people realize that the Amazon is changing dramatically during the last years. When I always ask the people, how many people do you think live in the Amazon? They used to say 100,000, 200,000, but in reality, there are 43 millions of people living in the Amazon, 43 millions, and only 3.5 are indigenous. What happened? How this changed? The Amazon was a synonymous of indigenous culture, but everything is changing so quickly. Unfortunately, the Amazon has support a lot of economic pulses along the years. We have in the 18th century, a lot of hunting of turtles and harvesting of turtle eggs, and also killing of manatees to use the blubber. All this blubber from the eggs of turtles and manatees were exported to Europe, especially to England and to France and Germany, for the lamps that put the light on the cities, like Frankfurt. So the killing of manatees, for example, at that time is estimated in thousands of animals, and also millions of eggs of turtles. So basically, some of these species were extirpated in some of the areas. But then, with the years, all this pattern of harvesting of animals was moving on, and there was a time where people were hunting jaguars, caimans, and otters for the fur, and to export all these skins to the European and American markets. Most recently is the exploitation of ornamental fish, big catfish, the timber of the trees. So there's a lot of economic pulses in the Amazon. Also, there are a large emerging cities in the forest. In the picture, you are looking at Manaus City. Manaus is almost 4 million of people, 4 million of people. And there are some cities of 2 million and 1 million. So these cities are growing faster in the Amazon and producing a lot of pollution in the water, and also deforestation. We also have problems with oil and agrochemical contamination. In some areas, for example, in Arauca, the spills of oil had a greater impact than the Exxon Valdez event. You know very well about this. So there are a lot of pollution in some specific stretches of the river. But the deforestation also is one of the most important threat in the Amazon. We already have lost more than 1 million of square kilometers. And why? Basically for cattle and also for soy crops. So now there are some policies trying to stop a little bit the expansion of the ranching in the Amazon, but it's sometimes not very successful. We have the last 4 years a government in Brazil promoting the expansion of economic activities in the Amazon. And this is the result. We have heard in the news a lot of fires in the Amazon, and basically the fire is being used as a tool to create deforestation and to create grasslands to put cattle. In the map, you can see on red all the degraded areas in the south of the Amazon, especially in Brazil. So we are losing a lot of areas. And we are just reaching the tipping point in the Amazon regarding deforestation. If we reach 25% of the deforestation, the climate impact will be huge. And we are now in 21% of deforestation. We are very close to this tipping point. Also, we have a loss of connectivity in the rivers, basically because there are a lot of dams. And the original idea was good to produce electricity using the power of the rivers. But the scale of the project is huge, and they basically cross the river and divide the river and stop the migration of fish, migration of turtles, and of course, river dolphins. So this is the results now of the Amazon, with a lot of problems about the threats, dams, mining, overfishing. So it's quite worrying, this. The Amazon as well is facing, and the Orinoco is facing climate change. The rivers are experiencing a lot of hydric stress. The volume of water is going down, and the models we are running predicts a reduction of almost 30 to 40% in the next 20 years. The impact of these losses of water is especially serious for dolphins, and in Bolivia and in the Orinoco. And during the last 8 years, 10 years, we have been rescued more than 80 dolphins in these areas. The story around the interaction with fisheries as well is not the very good one. The big nets started to be in place and use in the Amazon in the 70s. Before this year, there were not electricity in the Amazon, so there was pointless to fish a lot of catfish because they don't have the capacity to sell. But after the electricity came to the Amazon, large nets starting to be in place, and a lot of interaction, negative interaction with dolphins occurs. First with entanglement, with bycatch, but later when the dolphins learn how to catch the fish from the nets, the fishermen were very upset and started to shoot dolphins to avoid these interactions. And I'm sorry for the bad news. I will come with some good points during the talk. But here we have how the economic pulses affect the Amazon. For almost 30 years, there were a lot of fisheries focused on big catfish, but then this population started to collapse and the traders start to look for a different species, and they select this one that is called the piracatinga. And unfortunately, it's a scavenger fish, and people started to kill dolphins and caimans to attract the piracatinga. In 2014, the scientists in Brazil estimated that at least 1,000 dolphins were hunted illegally per year to try to feed this fishery. The way they used was catching the dolphin and placing in a cage to attract this scavenger fish and then to collect. And at that moment, everybody were very concerned. So people were proposing some dolphin conservation campaigns, but that was not about the dolphins, it was about the fisheries. Why the people were fishing a scavenger fish that nobody used to eat in the Amazon in such a large rivers? What happened with the big catfishes? So why the fisheries moved to other species like this scavenger fish? So we started to think that maybe it was a fishery issue, and then we started to address from the perspective of public health, because as a scavenger fish, probably this fish has a lot of pollutants. And yes, we found that especially this fish has a very large amounts of mercury. You can see here in red, this red line is the umbral, the threshold, the high threshold allowed for the World Health Organizations to eat a fish. All below the red line is safe, and above the red line is not safe to eat. So you can see the huge concentrations of mercury. But where is the mercury come in the Amazon? What is the source? There are some natural mercury on the ground, but when the people are creating deforestation, all the soil is exposed to the rain, and all this mercury just go into the water. But also, the mercury is used in gold mining, both in legal and illegal mining. They are using huge quantities of mercury. It's estimated that during the last 4 centuries of mining in the Amazon, almost 200,000 tons of mercury have placed in the river. But what is the situation of river dolphins? So we started to collect dolphins and to take samples, and we found large amounts of mercury on the dolphins, like 16.2 milligrams per kilograms. And you can see in the map all the areas where there are gold mining in the Amazon. So it's quite serious. So we started to do a health assessment on dolphins during the last 4 years, and we have sampled different rivers, and we have sampled females and males, and we have found that several animals have huge quantities of mercury, especially in the Orinoco River, because there is a stretch of the river in Venezuela where there are a very intense gold mining activity. So after all this, what is the situation? Fortunately, Brazil created a moratorium for the Piracatinga fishery in 2015, and is in place until now. We did a lot of public campaigns to avoid the consumption of this Piracatinga fish. And in Colombia, for example, in 2017, it was banned, the trade of this fish, because we showed that it has a lot of mercury. And at that moment, when we did this, we were thinking that we were doing something positive. But at the end, we were under threat because the traders identify us as responsible for the stopping of the fisheries. So if you can see and learn more about this situation, you can watch this film, A River Below. It's in Amazon Prime and in ITV as well. And it's a documentary that was in Tribeca Film Festival, and it presents the situation of the killing of dolphins and the mercury. We started to build management plans in different countries, but we stopped in Brazil and in Colombia. But now the Piracatinga fishery is in Venezuela, Peru, and Bolivia. Well, the situation of the dolphins are not very good. So during the last 4 years, I am part of the IUCN Cetacean Specialist Group, and we did a new assessment for the river dolphins, and now they are in the category of endangered, one category before extinct. So they are facing a lot of threats in the Amazon. Well, we need to produce scientific information. We were for years saying to the governments, the river dolphins are under threat, you need to do something. And they asked us, okay, how many dolphins are? We didn't know. And for years, from 1986, in a meeting in China, we started to recommend the developing of a methodology to count river dolphins. And every 2 years, we were doing the same. But finally, in 2000, in International Whaling Commission meeting, I decided to don't wait anymore. So we create a kind of a partnership with the St. Andrews University in Scotland. And we work with some scientists to the Amazon. We rent a boat and we start to develop the methodology. And also we are using photo ID. We can recognize individuals because many of them have very deep scars, notches, and pigmentation patterns that are able for us to differentiate the animals. And that was very good because in that moment when we started the photo ID, we connect the science with the conservation. We were putting the photos of the dolphins in the schools, in the indigenous schools, and the children were putting names for the dolphins. And that was very powerful because when these children were with their fathers fishing in a forbidden area and they saw one of the dolphins, they say, "Father, you need to take off the net because here is Frank in the water." So it was working quite well, this work with the schools and with the children and the photo ID. The abundance estimations, basically, we are running from 2001 when we started the program. And one of the limitations was the amount of money that we probably needed to do all these expeditions in such a large area that is the Amazon and the Orinoco. So we started to rent cargo boats in the rivers, and we placed 2 platforms to observe the dolphins and to count the dolphins. So far, we have surveyed more than 52,600 kilometers in South America, in 6 countries, 7 now because we are doing as well some job now in Guyana. We have trained more than 460 researchers. More than 20 organizations have been involved in all these surveys on the river. And here there's a kind of samples of the boats we were using. In some cases, we use cargo boats. In another, we use tourist boats during the not tourist season. And for example, here in the bottom, you can see it's not a very luxurious ships we are using, for example, in the Ganges in India, where also there are some river dolphins. Those animals are incredible. They have a very incredible behaviors. One of the most powerful climate effect on the Amazon is the flood pools. There are some seasons where there are a lot of rain and the level of the river is so high. And the difference between the high season and the low the dry season is 14 meters high, 14, and thousands of kilometers on the side. So when the forest is flooded, all the fish go inside the flooded forest, and the dolphins just move inside the flooded forest to catch the fish. And then when everything is dry, it's the time of plenty. All the fish are concentrated in a small areas. The dolphin feed a lot, and it's the time for mating. So they are gregarious, especially during the summer. They are polyandrous, and the females select the males. The males approach the females, and the mate are very short, but during 1 or 2 hours. You can see here a photograph of the penis of a dolphins. Sometimes they became a little bit aggressive. And as well, we have recorded some aggressive interaction of males to the calves. Some cases where the males kill calves probably to induce the females to mate again. They are very curious animals. They follow the canoes of the indigenous. They used to transport branches, leaves, whatever they find. Even sometimes they play with anacondas or with electric fish, or they used to follow the canoes and start to release bubbles. So the indigenous are very scared of this, because you imagine yourself in the middle of the night in a small canoe, pedaling or fishing in silence, and suddenly all the water start to have a lot of bubbles, and suddenly a huge dolphin, pink dolphins, appears just beside your canoe and breathe very noisily. So it's those animals are very respected there for the local people. So we have a lot of learnings from all these expeditions. We know that densities are quite different between countries and between rivers. We found very low densities of dolphins in Ecuador and Tocantins. So probably there they are the most endangered populations of dolphins. We have very high densities in some rivers in Brazil and in Bolivia and in Peru. And we found that the best period to sample, to survey the rivers, was the transitional waters. Because when everything is flooded, the dolphins are inside the forest, and we cannot go with a big boat. And during the dry season, everything is dry, and we cannot move with the boat in all the habitats. So the right moment to do all the surveys are the transitional periods. We are finding some priority areas for evaluation, especially the ones where there are dams, where the people are hunting dolphins, where there are negative interaction with fisheries. And we are using this information of densities of dolphins in some rivers in the Orinoco to combine with other indicators as a way to measuring the health of the rivers. And the other important thing is that we need to evaluate the population trends. It's not enough to do a survey in one river. We need to do in a regular basis in order to see if the populations are growing or are reducing. But all these expeditions are also useful to study other species. When we just started, we only have scientists focused on the dolphins. But then we realized that we had a very important platform of opportunity to do other things. So we invite other scientists, botanics, herpetologists, ichthyologists, to do surveys on the biodiversity of the rivers. So we are generating a lot of information. During the last 5 years, we started a regional initiative called SARDI, the South American River Dolphin Initiative. So we did a partnership with several organizations in South America and with WWF in order to have the same methodologies and to try to move all the scientific research and conservation efforts in the same directions. One of these research we started with SARDI was the tagging, the satellite tagging of river dolphins. And why was this? Basically, we need the dolphins tell us what are the most important stretches of the rivers to protect, because the politics used to say to us, we cannot protect the whole river Amazon. It's impossible. But if you gave us some inputs of what areas are really important for biodiversity and for people, we are going to do something. So with this, we have tagged 45 dolphins. We are monitoring all these species in 4 countries. Basically, we capture the dolphins, we restrain them, and we start to do all the procedures. We have veterinarians, we have fishermen working with us, we have people from the government as well, and we probably take between 12 to 20 minutes per dolphin. Now we are doing some ecographies to learn more about the dolphins, and we are collecting samples for genetics and also for mercury on the dolphins. We have tagged 48 dolphins in 4 countries. We found some large movements of males, especially the males. The females, that is very interesting. The females remain almost in the same areas with the calves, but the males move a lot along the rivers. So these areas where the females live are the most important to protect. And we have created some special protection and some agreements with the governments and with the local people to do this. Here you can see, this is in the Colombian Amazon, and all these dots are the presence of dolphins with calves. And now all this is a Ramsar site. The Ramsar site is a kind of figure that protect the wetlands in the countries. There are so many Ramsar sites in the United States, in Mexico, in Canada, and in all the countries. But as was I saying, we needed to work with the local people to create solutions. We needed to evaluate changes in behavior and perception. So we need to work with with Indigenous. And here you can see a pictography. This pictography of dolphins were drawn almost 12,000 years ago. So it's a very antique. The socioeconomic approach basically is fundamental to work with local communities. We need to understand the local needs of the people. How we can talk about conservation in areas where there are so many unmet needs. It's easy from the cities. We always say we need to protect the Amazon, we need to protect the forest, but what about all the people living there? It's a long-term process. It's not so easy. We need to connect all this conservation with economic processes, and we need to create a connection with the local communities. So one of the things we were doing was fishery agreements. The fisheries were collapsing basically because there were a lot of people using nets and trying to harvest all the fish. So we started a process with the same Indigenous to produce agreements that they propose for themselves. And now the indigenous are the guardians of the lakes. We can see the recovery of the fishes, of the fisheries, especially some fish like this large pirarucu. The pirarucu is one of the largest fish in the planet. It's 3.5 meters long. It's 280 kilograms or 300 kilograms. It's a huge fish and almost was disappearing from all this area, but now it's recovering. And just during the last year, we published with FAO a chapter where they use as an example of conservation with indigenous communities, all the process we are doing here in the Amazon. And also you need to learn about the forest and this strong relationship between the fish and the forest. And we create a program called Seeds of Life. I remember years ago, you can see this fish in the middle of the picture, is a cachama. I wanted to eat one of these fish, and I asked an indigenous, a fisherman, to catch one of these fish. And the guy said to me, yes, let's come with me. And we went in a canoe in the middle of the forest, in the flooded forest, and the indigenous, the man started to look to the trees, to the top of the trees. And I was so worried because probably the man understood me wrong, and they were looking, he was looking for a monkey or for a sloth, and I didn't want to kill one of these animals. But suddenly we arrived to a tree, and the indigenous said, yes, this is the tree. And then threw a hook to the water, and in 3 minutes, they captured the fish. So I asked, why was looking the trees? And he explained me that the forest is like a supermarket. They are looking for specific trees because they produce some seeds, and just below the specific tree, there are some specific fish. The fish are very specialized in eat some of the fruits. So we learned that it's very important for the indigenous communities to have this flooded forest in a good conditions. So we started to restaurate the forest flooded, the flooded forest, and we already planted in the last 2 years 28,000 trees, and we have involved more than 600 families, indigenous families, and we are creating also a program that is called the Forest Library. Because people always say, okay, we cut a tree, or 1 hectare of forest was on fire, but every single tree is an ecosystem. In one single tree in Brazil, scientists found 95 different species of ants. In Germany, in the whole Germany, there are only 94 species in the whole country. And in one tree, they have 95 different species of ants. So one tree is an ecosystem, and it's important that the people are aware of that. Also, we were promoting the dolphins as a central of the attraction of the tourists. And we did an economic analysis in 40 kilometers of the Amazon River in Colombia. And there was an income of $8.3 million per year. This is a huge amount of money if you consider, for example, that Colombia is the 3rd country that export ornamental fish, and the whole income for the ornamental fish of the country is $7 million. So we were talking here about a small area producing $8.3 million. So each dolphin was generating in the Amazon $20,000 per year. So here comes the economic decisions. For the Piracatinga fishery, people were paying $25 per dolphin to kill a dolphin. And one alive dolphin in a tourist activity can generate almost $20,000 per year. So it's easy to take a decision with that. We also work a lot with environmental education for 35 years. So all these children, when we started, now they are the captains of the community. They are policemen. They are different personalities, and I think you can see the changes in time and attitude and perception of people with the dolphins. The dolphins are becoming more and more important for local people. But also, we need to secure areas, protect areas to protect the dolphins. So with the money, we start to do all these expeditions and the production of scientific information with other species. We nominated 3 Ramsar sites that almost represent millions of hectares, rivers in the Orinoco and Ecuador, and also in the Colombian Amazon. And in these areas, we are doing a lot of conservation efforts. One of these examples is Tarapoto Ramsar site in the Colombian Amazon. This is a small area of 44,000 hectares where we are developing dolphin washing. This area has been certificated as the first destination of nature in the country. We have the program of Seas of Life. We are creating reforestation of the forest. We have the fishery agreements. We have a management plan for all this area. There is a Ramsar designation, and more recently, there is a OMEC designation for all this area. So we put it in place along 30 years, a lot of tools of conservation in order that this area will be a kind of pilot model of our example where dolphins and people can coexist. But also, we need to move into the political level, how we can tackle the threats. Scientists, we are good to collect information, scientific information, but how we can stop the mining, illegal mining, how we can stop the fragmentation of the rivers or the deforestation. So we did a South American action plan in 2010 and finishing in 2020. But during this time, we lobby with all the governments, and we help the governments to create specific national action plans. So now all the countries have national action plans to protect river dolphins. But again, the problem is every country has their agenda, but how we can have a general view of the conservation of the whole Amazon. So now in the International Whaling Commission, the governments of Colombia, Brazil, Ecuador, and Peru signed an agreement to do a conservation management plan for the next 10 years. I'm the coordinator of this management plan, and we are starting to look for specific areas to stop or to mitigate all the threats on the rivers. So the challenges are huge. There are so many discussions worldwide about how many efforts we need to do with the dolphins. We need to integrate river dolphins conservation with fisheries, pollution, climate change, and also the infrastructure development. We need to strengthen the governability of the regions and generate economic sustainable alternatives for local communities. This is a large area. You cannot see a police or a military forces controlling this huge area. So we need that the people that live there are convinced of the conservation and are part of this process. And we need to connect river health with the dolphin conservation and the well-being of the local communities. And of course, we need to create more protect areas looking in the aquatic ecosystems. Well, I think basically this is all I wanted to tell you today, and I will open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fernando. Fascinating stuff. We have a couple questions that have picked up in the chat, and if anyone else who's listening on tonight has some additional questions, you can pop those into the chat as well. So our first question is from Tara Killip. She is asking about the impacts of COVID on ecotourism if that had an impact in those regions and if you're seeing a positive change and growth in ecotourism.
It's a very good question. We have this 8.3 million before the COVID pandemic, and then the indigenous communities spent 2 years with no incomes at all, and it was very hard time for them. And now it's recovering, but also the pandemic was very negative in the sense that in the border between Colombia and Venezuela, some fishermen started to kill dolphins to use the blubber for medicine. They claimed that the blubber and the oil of dolphin was good to protect the COVID and to cure the COVID. So they started to kill a lot of dolphins, and we have this problem now in the border, in the Orinoco River, in the border between Colombia and Venezuela. During the last month, we record 6 dolphins were killed and harpooned, basically.
That's rough. We see sometimes every step forward, we have to take a few back, but fingers crossed for progress in the future. We had a question about what a Ramsar designation is. Can you explain a little bit more about that particular designation?
Yes, sure. All the countries wants to protect the wetlands. The water is very important. And the regular protect areas, you have the terrestrial areas and the marine areas. But in general, the approach is always terrestrial. So in a country, you can use the rivers as the border of a protect area, but never is clear if the river itself is part of the protect area or not. So the Ramsar is a convention that was signed in the city of Ramsar in Iran in 1972. And now there are more than 160 countries signature of this convention, and every country proposed the most critical and important wetlands. So it's a designation. So in the case of Colombia, for example, is the president itself that need to write a letter of intention to the Ramsar secretary that is in Switzerland, proposing a specific area. So then we need to complete a form trying to identify why this is a unique wetland and why it's important to get this international recognition. So it's a long process and also require a management plan. And those Ramsar areas are not protection strict, but they are able to, for the people to carry on the economic alternatives, but in a sustainable way. Basically, this is the Ramsar sites approach.
Awesome. Thank you. We had a specific question about river dolphins and their populations in Ecuador. Do you know anything about the situation of them there?
Yes, the densities are very low, and we don't know exactly why. It was an earthquake in 1982, and everything changed in the Ecuadorian Amazon. There was a lot of mud going into the water, and a lot of fish was killed. So there's not big fisheries in Ecuadorian rivers. Probably this is the reason, because they don't support large populations of dolphins. Other people believe that maybe the dolphins are just expanding to the Ecuador now, but we are not very sure. We are doing studies evaluating this. And now we are going to do some environmental DNA to track dolphins in different rivers in Ecuador, in the Amazonian Ecuador.
Thank you. Very cool. Very interesting. We have several questions right now asking about the ecotourism and dolphins, dolphin encounters, and sort of the ethics, and that we know that there are some tourism that can be damaging or harmful to local wildlife, and others that are much more respectful and done more sustainably. Can you expand upon that a little bit, and if there are specific places people should go to find the best ones?
Absolutely. There are different kinds of tourists in the Amazon. We have divided in different kind of interests. There are some tourists that just wants to go to the Amazon because it's the largest rainforest. They want to live or to have the experience to stay with indigenous communities and have the passion to see the animals and to discover the animals. There are other kind of tourists that we used to call the express tourists. They want to do everything in one day. So in one day, they want to dance with the indigenous, they want to watch a jaguar, they want to swim with dolphins. And this is the very danger kind of tourists. They promote animals in captivity for photographies, and this is very bad. For example, in Brazil, there are like 8 places where you can go and swim with dolphins. And it was very bad. I remember the first time I went to one of these places, the people were drunk and they were just grabbing the dolphins and putting beer on the blowhole of the dolphins. So it was absolutely disgusting. So we did a lot of pressure in the Brazilian government and they regulated the activity, because the other problem is that they feed the dolphins, and those dolphins in particular never catch a fish again. So they became useless in some way. The calves, they don't know how to catch fish. So now the regulations in Brazil allow only to feed the dolphins 2 days per week. And the other time, the dolphins need to move in the area looking for the fish. But this is very controversial. This is very controversial, this kind of tourists. I really promote the tourists where the people can go in a small boat with indigenous, moving in the river, discovering the monkeys, the birds, and suddenly you have seen a dolphin. This is useful. You are putting the money with the local communities and not with big companies. So there is a lot to look regarding the tourists.
You did. So I guess if someone's looking for that in particular encounter, the key things are looking to support local communities, looking for engaging with indigenous tour guides and whatnot, and looking for a more holistic and long-term experience. Don't go for a single day, but stay for the whole experience.
Exactly.
Potentially a great question to end on here, which is, the species, is it both? Are they both on? They're both impacted, and their populations aren't doing great. Are we seeing any positive changes in populations of any of these? And I said both species. I'm talking 20 years ago. There are now 5 species. So how are they doing? A general synopsis. Can we see any positivity in the growth of the populations on the horizon?
Well, it's difficult. We published a paper last year evaluating population trends in different rivers, and the pattern in all the rivers is the populations are going down. Only in one river, in the Orinoco, the pattern was different and was positive, like the populations were growing. And we just finished an expedition in that river 1 month ago. And now we are concerned because the numbers probably are going down. And the survival of the river dolphins rely on the health of the rivers itself. If we have healthy rivers, we are going to have healthy fisheries, healthy people, and healthy dolphins. We cannot save the dolphins without healthy ecosystems. And it's one of the stronger things we are working with the governments and with the people and with the organizations to focus on this. We need healthy ecosystems, because if not, it will be very, very difficult.
And the major drivers of population declines in these species are the interactions with fisheries and hunting, poaching for the different fisheries as well. Is that right?
Yes, the poaching and also the bycatch. Just today, we were doing an evaluation about the use of pingers. on the nets in the Amazon. There are some pilot programs in Brazil and in Peru, and we are going to start in other countries using these acoustic deflectors on the nets to prevent the dolphins to approach a lot. But it is difficult. There are so many people in the Amazon. We need to produce economic incomes in the communities, and we need to think some very creative solutions for the region.
Well, thank you so much, Fernando. There are lots of really great words coming about on the chat about your presentation. Everybody's very thankful for the work that you're doing and for the presentation that you've provided. So I will extend that thanks as well from myself, from our sponsors at Marathon. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and I look forward to working with you again in 2 years, right? We're going to Brazil?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And in the meantime, we are doing expeditions every year in different rivers, in different areas. If somebody wants to join one of these expeditions, write to me, and we can send the information when will be the expeditions, and maybe you will come. So if you want to live the experience of an expedition in the Amazon and the Orinoco.
Fantastic. If anybody's interested, you can connect through me. I can connect you with Fernando, and we can make that happen. So thank you so much. We have another wonderful lecture coming up on March 2nd. We have Eduardo Secchi, who's going to come through Zoom to Marine Mammal Care Center and all of you to talk to us a little bit about the Franciscano dolphin and a few other species in the work that he does. So I look forward to hearing from that, and it was great to hear you as well. And everybody, Fernando has shared his email in the chat as well. So if you're wanting to contact him directly, there you go.
We can do
thanks, everybody.
In both ways. Thank you very much for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Really wonderful stuff. Thank you so much.